Michael Thomas was all set to be a huge name after playing Tubbs in Miami Vice. He had it all: looks, charisma, talent. But once the show ended, things took a turn for the weird. While his co-star Don Johnson thrived, Thomas disappeared from the spotlight despite his plans to become a megastar. And you'll be surprised at what exactly happened. Odd one role. It was actually due to a huge stroke of luck that Thomas ended up on Miami Vice. The show cost around $1 million per episode, very unusual for the time, and many actors were in competition for the lead roles. None other than Denzel Washington went for the part of Tubbs, but it was Thomas who had the best chemistry with co-lead Don Johnson. Massive hit. As it turned out, Miami Vice was arguably the show of the 1980s. It was slick, sophisticated and cool, gaining a massive army of fans as a result. Everyone thought at that point that Philip Michael Thomas would become a huge star, including the man himself. Interviews from the period show what he believed his future would hold. And he wasn't afraid to dream very big. Big plans. In a March 1985 interview with Rolling Stone magazine, Thomas enthused about what his future in the entertainment industry would hold. He wanted to get an EGOT, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, and he considered his starring role on Miami Vice to be a means to that end. "This is just a stepping stone for me to something far greater," he explained, "and it's a great, great stepping stone." Golden tickets, Golden Globes. Rolling Stone added that perhaps Miami Vice was Thomas' ticket to an Emmy, but unfortunately, no Emmy nomination would ever come, just one for a Golden Globe. He was pursuing other avenues at the same time, though. And that year he released an album, Living the Book of My Life, a track from which actually featured in Miami Vice. But the record still didn't sell well. Stage work. Still, Thomas appeared to be getting other stepping stones in place back then, too. He told Rolling Stone that he'd co-written a musical called The Legend of Stagger Lee and personally penned more than half of its songs. He also had plans for a movie adaptation, the famous play No Place to Be Somebody, which he'd already starred in on Broadway. Theology. Though, the interview also went into Thomas' spiritual side. Before becoming an actor, he'd actually been a student of theology, and it remained a field that he was interested in. According to the Rolling Stone interviewer, the young man would drive his philosophy instructors nuts with his free-form beliefs while studying at the University of California. So his big ideas went far past the entertainment industry, expressing himself. But said ideas were quite confusing to a lot of people. For someone who is able to express himself with such richness and whose understanding of human nature is acute, his departure into astro talk is baffling, the article Rolling Stone commented. Perhaps it is the line of defense not present in his eyes that sounded like a bad omen. Prayer circle. Paul. Interestingly, according to an unnamed cast member of the show, the Miami Vice set was much more spiritual than many fans realized. They told the interviewer that Thomas, Johnson, and other actors would often get together and pray in a circle. "Sometimes we talk about our problems," they said, "but mostly we give thanks for what we have here. An interesting life." A couple of months later, in July 1985, Thomas did a solo interview with the Los Angeles Times. He began with the statement, "My life is so interesting," and then went into detail about just how interesting it was. "I am on such a strong power," he elaborated. "I just turned 36, which is a 9-3 plus 6 is 9, and after this year, it's like 1s and 8s, power, 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 all the way. Worth standing for." Thomas continued, "I constantly construct and reconstruct my consciousness, and I'm constantly learning. I believe if a man hasn't found something worth standing for, then a man will fall for anything, and I do have some pretty solid things that I live by. It's just a matter of passing on things." But was he one of those men who'd fall for anything? Hypnosis. Thomas was equally grandiose when discussing the industry he worked in, saying that he considered television to be a sort of neuro-linguistic programming or hypnosis. He added that not too many of us know any history past television. It is the thing that is the guiding light. We have to have people that are sensitive to humanity because it could be very destructive. PMT. The Los Angeles Times mentioned some of the plans Thomas had, including putting out some more music and creating a women's fashion brand. Yet neither of these projects made him into the global superstar he seemed to so badly want to be. His clothing line ended up being called PMT, which were his initials, of course, but unfortunately the initials of something else too, in that number. Thomas' statements became even more dramatic as time went on and, some might say, more egotistical. During a 1985 People magazine interview, he declared, "There are only a few who'll be the Fords, the Edisons, the Carnegies, and I think I'm in that number." Plus, as Miami Vice continued to film, he started wearing a necklace with EGOT on it. CARE, acronym. But what did he mean by EGOT? Well, in a rambling interview with the Miami Herald newspaper at the end of 1985, he said, "It means energy, growth, opportunity, and talent. It's also a character I've created, a mythical space character that I'm going to put in one of my videos. He's an angel of light that comes from outer space. On the way, he passes ET, going home, after Vice." This was all strange stuff, perhaps to some people worrying stuff even. But Thomas appeared to do okay even as his acting career took a downward turn. After Miami Vice ended in 1989 due to falling ratings, Thomas made the TV movie False Witness with Phylicia Rashad, a pal of his. That one didn't lead to an Emmy, either though. Fasting. Thomas spoke to the Chicago Tribune that year about how his life was going, saying that he was focusing on health-related matters. He claimed, "I went on a 40-day fast this summer with a friend visiting from New York, Bishop Abuna Nathaniel Williams. I maintained no solid foods, just juices and water. The spiritual revelations from the process of cleansing and prayer, it's the greatest natural high in the world." Religious studies. But the actor also had plenty to say about religion. Thomas told the interviewer that he'd read and continued to read multiple religious texts, the Bible, the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita. "You learn from those who have come before when you read and study the wisdom of the ages," he stated. "In my sojourn, I'm searching for knowledge, wisdom and understanding or overstanding." The theatre. Thomas then brought up a major achievement in his life, which was creating the Philip Michael Thomas Miamiway Theatre. He explained, "I think the power of TV to communicate can be one of the most powerful, positive means on the planet. We have to resurrect consciousness. If we're going to have heaven on earth, we've got to have spiritual upliftment, psychic connection." But though he'd created a theatre to nurture future talent, Thomas' own career was stalling drastically by the middle of the next decade. So he turned to a different form of entertainment away from acting a psychic hotline. During 1994, he signed a contract with the company Traffics Inc. and started the Philip Michael Thomas Psychic Connection. His catchphrase was from Miami Vice to World Advice. Lawsuit. Unfortunately, that wasn't to last either. Before long, the Philip Michael Thomas Psychic Connection was no more and the actor was ditched in favor of Miss Cleo. Thomas wasn't going down without a fight, though. He successfully filed a suit against the company for breaching their deal. In fact, he walked out of court with a big enough sum of money that he may not have ever needed to work again. Vindicated. The summer of 2002, Thomas was handed $2.3 million as a result of the suit. It'd taken 8 years in all for the case to be concluded, and Traffics Inc. was in trouble for other reasons as well by that point. Thomas' lawyer Madison McClellan told CNN after the ruling he feels very used. This decision validates his claims. He feels vindicated. It's kind of a double win for us. Lance Vance. Buns. After that victory, though, Thomas' star dimmed even further. But he did net himself one other high-profile job. During the 2000s, he voiced the character Lance Vance, who was definitely a riff on Tubbs from Miami Vice in a couple of the very popular Grand Theft Auto Vice City video games. Unfortunately, by 2006, that job was over as well. Meanwhile, yet in contrast to Thomas, Don Johnson's kept working regularly. and the other Miami Vice lead remains an actor who's much in demand. Throughout the 1990s, he starred in 6 seasons of the detective show Nash Bridges. Thomas actually joined him for a couple of episodes before he stopped acting, and more recently Johnson's been in Knives Out and Book Club. The Thomas family. But even if Thomas seemingly doesn't have work to concentrate on anymore, he does have a family. And it's a big family at that. He has 11 kids by several different women, 5 of them with model Cassandra Green, to whom he was married for a decade. And one of those children, Sacred Light Amadeus Thomas, is making a name for himself as a social media star. Similar son. 1. Sacred, a model, just like his mother, has over 100,000 followers between TikTok and Instagram, and people clearly like what he has to offer. Whenever he posts a picture of himself, his followers fall over each other to compliment him and point out the similarities to his father, who of course was also famously good-looking back in the day. Icon and Angel. Another member of the family is also trying to branch out into the entertainment business. That's Imaj Thomas, who's a country music singer and songwriter. She makes her connection clear on her official website, which reads, "I was born in Miami Beach, Florida, as an only girl of 5 children to my father, 1980s TV icon Philip Michael Thomas, and my angel mother. Creative environment." Imaj seems to have followed in her father's footsteps when it comes to spirituality too. "At a very young age, I fell in love with the mystery of life, what was beyond the vault of heaven, the people on earth, what it all meant, and now what it all meant, and now what it all means to be alive," her website states. "The creative environment I was raised in encouraged that curiosity, and so that inquisitive nature has never left me." Memories. And it's thanks to Sacred and Imaj that we have some idea of what Thomas is like as a family man. They both frequently post pictures of their parents on Instagram and talk about how close they are to them. In 2019, Imaj posted a throwback pic and wrote, "Loving memories with Daddy. You know, it's funny, everyone compliments his beautiful skin and says he ages like a vampire. Creator. Creator." So Thomas has a legacy in his children, clearly, and he has another legacy too. It's thought that he's the person who actually coined the term EGOT, a word so common nowadays that most people don't even know how it came to be. But thanks to Thomas, Tracy Morgan, and the TV show 30 Rock, it's entered into mainstream culture. Bling explosion. In a 2009 episode of 30 Rock, Morgan's character goes to a store called Yakov's Nubian Bling Explosion, and among the jewelry there, he finds a massive gold necklace spelling out EGOT. Not many people would have known it at the time, but this was clearly a reference to the necklace Thomas reportedly wore while making Miami Vice. Good goal. Once he takes an interest in the unusual item, Morgan's character is told by a salesman that belonged to Philip Michael Thomas, the actor who played Tubbs on Miami Vice. It stands for Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. 4 awards that Thomas planned on winning in his career. Morgan responds, "That's a good goal for a talented, crazy person. New idea." What Thomas thought about Morgan labeling him a crazy person even in jest, we still don't know. But the episode, which also involves Tracy Morgan seeking out Whoopi Goldberg to learn how she won her own Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony, ended up going down in television history. Suddenly the term EGOT was everywhere, and it definitely didn't seem that silly for a performer to set it as a career goal. New interview. In 2016, many years after celebrities started describing themselves as EGOT, Thomas gave an interview to the website Thrillist about the phenomenon he'd accidentally created. And just to add to the offbeat aura that surrounds Thomas' whole career, the interview took place at a party for the 135th anniversary of Thomas English Muffins, where anyone called Thomas got a free one. Questions. Allah Kimbar. Thrillist asked Thomas, "Here's our burning question. Does a daytime Emmy count toward an EGOT?" Thomas said no. It had to be a primetime Emmy. That was awkward, since a daytime Emmy's the one Whoopi Goldberg has. But he did add, you can win all 4 of those awards however you get it. But it's not really about the awards. If you study to be a doctor, you want a degree, right? 30 years ago. The Thrillist interviewer then asked him, so should there be a new phrase for people who've completed an EGOT via Daytime Emmy? The DAGOT. Thomas answered, you got to remember, this is 30 years ago. And when I coined the phrase, it had nothing to do with being limited. So if somebody else wanted to have a DAGOT, they could. Awkwardness. After that, though, the interview got weird, even weirder than some of Thomas' other chats with journalists. He appeared to awkwardly flirt with the interviewer, even going so far as to pinch her face, before asking, do you know Miami Vice? Then getting her to name some sports, and then saying, there's things so much more fascinating than this, what you're talking about.